Pirates set up bases in unknown sectors. They frequently spawn single or pairs of raiders. These roam the game world and will become the bane of many civilian ships, depending on local security. Areas with NPC police presence will be quite safe, but empty sector clusters often suffer a serious pirate infestation. There is an upper limit for active pirates in the galaxy, but they could all be mostly hanging around in your area. Their raiding ships are quite fast, and even a single fighter is going to be lethal for most trade ships. So this is a danger you have to take into account. Since pirates get stronger as your empire grows, you eventually have to sally forth and take their bases down. They won't respawn. And this often marks your first experience with real warfare in Mayhem 3, because you have to find ways to attack a strategic target, potentially far away, while still defending your assets back at home. Your problem are the tough pirate M6 corvettes. They are rare, but they can kill any freighter easily, and also the escorts you might have assigned to them. I think a lot of players are losing many assets to corvettes, and workers and escorts aren't smart enough to avoid these. But Mayhem's fleet system actually can. A dedicated killer group just for hunting pirate fighters is possible, and it's one of the best solutions for this problem. It can catch lone pirate stragglers, and it can keep your traffic lanes clean. But they will also retreat as soon as they spot any tougher opponents like xenon patrols or pirate corvettes. This makes such a fleet very useful, cost-effective and survivable. And this is how you set it up. A fleet of 3 heavy fighters already works well enough to take out a single pirate fighter without any trouble. The followers should roughly share the same speed, but for the best setup the leader should be quite a bit slower than his followers. The followers can go and grab an Autorepair. He can't. So promote the slowest ship to become fleet commander and make the other 2 his followers. Open your fleet settings. We want auto repair on yes, so that followers return to an outpost and grab a repair on their own. This costs you nothing. You can set the patrol timer all the way down. We only want them to take a quick peek into any sector and then move on to the next one if they can't find any enemies. Retreat maximum jumps can be set to 2. This means that once the fleet retreats, they don't run far away and just leave the sector. Be careful with setting this down to 1, since the enemy may enter the same gate your fleet left and he may catch them sitting right behind it. Sadly, there is no option for an on-screen warning to notify you once a fleet initiates a retreat. But you can use a vanilla feature and tell the leader to send you a message once all orders are complete. This way you will at least get notified after a successful retreat, because you have to tell the fleet what to do next. The enemy fleet ratio for retreats depends on your own fleet strength. If you increase this, your fleet becomes more ballsy and they think they can handle tougher opponents. Don't set this too high if you want them to still flee from pirate corvettes, but also not too low or they flee right away just from detecting multiple pirate fighters scattered around the sector. So you have to play around a bit. A ratio of 1 to 3 is usually good. If your fleet is bigger, they consider themselves stronger, so maybe put this down to 1 to 2, so that they still retreat from corvettes. If you're using too many ships, they won't flee, so try to keep an eye on them and see if the setting works first. Because I don't know how these fleet strengths are getting calculated. Maybe it's just class dependent and any M6 is considered to be worth 7 M3 or something like that. This is the scanning range of the commander. If your commander is the slowest ship, you can leave this at its very high default level to make him monitor the entire sector. If your commander is not slower than his followers, then you should set his follower scanning range slightly higher to make them engage first and get a head start. But this won't work in every situation, because sometimes your commander and his followers will detect an enemy at the same time. for example if a new pirate enters a gauge at short range. The follower scanning range is actually quite optional. You can safely set this down to 0 because followers will always attack what the commander is attacking. They break formation once the commander chooses a target. So depending on your commander's scanning range, all ships will still cover the distance to the enemy at their own pace, and their individual speed will determine which ships reach the target first. This is why on high scanning ranges it gets increasingly more important that your followers have comparable speed levels, so that they arrive at the same time and don't get picked off one by one. And your commander should always be slower so that his followers can pass him and keep him away from harm. Later on you can use slow and tanky cap ships and this gets less of an issue, but early on you might not have these available. If follower scanning range is greater than 0, followers will also scan individually for targets. This can be useful if you want your fleet to guard a certain position, for example camping at a jump gate or at a pirate base. In this case you would set the commander's scanning range to 0 and only increase follower scanning range. The fleet becomes stationary, but followers will still engage any enemy who enters their scanning range. It's important to understand that you can use your fleet without issuing any fleet commands. The fleet commander could simply follow a standard move order or even sit in space doing nothing, and his followers would still engage. Feel free to experiment a lot. Followers will always scan based on the enemy's distance to their commander. So your followers might leave their scanning range to chase and kill off an opponent, but once he is down they won't scan again based on their current position. Instead your fleet will always tether back to the commander. Low scanning ranges for the commander and his followers ensure that your fleet tends to stay rather tightly packed, which is good for large-scale battles where you don't want your ships to rush all over the place and keep a certain cohesion. And if you set both scanning ranges down to 0, you are effectively putting the fleet in defensive mode. The fleet as a whole would only attack new targets if the commander gets under fire. And followers will only defend themselves on an individual level. This can be useful if you're attacking a pirate base and want most ships to focus on the station and don't want the fleet as a whole to get distracted by any respawning pirate ships. Now simply tell your fleet to patrol a certain area and they will already do a good job at this. Maybe even set up multiple fleets like these. And don't just cover your own area, they can help you to grind some reputation in NPC sectors too.